In this section, we'll be looking at the Pull tool. So I'm going to open up the Pull folder, and specifically we'll be looking at Pull Edges. So we'll click on the first document, 1_pull edges. In SpaceClaim, there's several ways edges can be pulled on to make modifications. If you look in the Options panel, you'll see that there's 5 different ways you can change an edge. Edges can be pulled, chamfered, extruded, copied, and pivoted. And we'll see what that means during this section. First, if I click on a single edge, you notice the default action is to create a round. The second option we have is to create a chamfer. So we'll choose chamfer in the mini toolbar, and that's the exact same thing as picking it in the options panel. There's no difference between picking them in the pull options or to select an edge and pick it in the mini toolbar. Here we can pull one chamfer, or if I double click an edge loop, it'll grab all 4 at the same time and I can chamfer them together. I'm going to type in 5 millimeters. Next, let's look at extrude. I'm going to double click the bottom edge, and if it grabs the incorrect edge, remember you can double click again to cycle through the different possible edge loops. Now that I have the bottom selected, I'll switch from chamfer to extrude. Notice when I do this, 2 arrows are shown on the edge. And you'll notice the arrows next to my cursor are facing left to right. To make them face vertically, you can click on the down arrow, and now they're pointed vertically. So we'll be pulling this edge up or down. I'm going to escape to cancel that. You can pick the edge by clicking on it, or by hitting the Tab key, you can tab between those 2 edges. And we'll want to pull this outward. So make sure the arrow is facing left to right, and drag the surface outward and type in 20. Now you'll notice that a new surface has been created in the structure tree. Extrude offsets that edge and creates a surface. Now we can select on the bottom face of the solid and the surface to pull them both at the same time. You'll notice this makes a nice little box on the bottom of our model. Now let's look at the next option, which is copy. I'm going to double click on these edges until I get the bottom loop. We've looked at round, chamfer, and extrude, and next we're going to look at copy. But first I want to show you the difference between extrude and copy. Right now I have extrude picked. If I tab to switch arrows, I'll pull this outward. And you'll notice that as I pull this, it makes a new surface, and we can see the surface in the structure tree. I'm going to undo with Ctrl-Z or in the Quick Access toolbar. I'm going to switch to copy, and I can switch inside of our Pull Options panel on the left middle side of the screen. When I'm copying edges outward, you'll notice that it doesn't create a new surface. It simply subdivides the face into a new region. And notice if it gets large enough, it gets trimmed by the edges of that face. I'm going to pull this out 10 millimeters. Copying edges on a face is a very fast way to offset them. It works just like the offset tool does on sketch curves. Now our top face is subdivided into 2 sections. As I pull on this face, you'll notice that the face below it gets extended as I do so. Remember, to ignore the influence of the chamfer, I can select the edge and the face itself. Now I can pull this up or down and not have the chamfer follow it. And I can pull this up 5 millimeters. Now in most cases, it's not a good idea to have a chamfer come right up against an edge. It can make it difficult to modify that chamfer. If you ever need to remove a chamfer property from a face, you can always look at the Properties panel. This is where I can change the setbacks or remove the chamfer property. By switching that to false, the face will edit just like any normal face. So you can pull it to make a change, or we could remove it by filling it in. Now let's look at Pivot, our last edge option. I'm going to select on our edge on one side and Control select our edge on the other by rolling the mouse wheel through the model as I hold down the Control key. Now you'll notice I have our last pivot option all the way to the right. Just like copy and extrude, there's two ways I can pivot these edges, and I can tab between them. Now that our direction has been chosen, you'll notice that pivot offsets the location of these edges, pulling them to the right and growing them, or pulling them to the left to shrink them. Now I can type in a value and hit enter. You'll notice it also works on circles, allowing you to pivot edges larger or pivot them smaller. Notice this gives me the offset dimension from where they were originally. So in this section, add chamfers to the top edge loop, offset to create the base, use copy to create this little box, remove the chamfer property, and try pivot.